I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons, 1983 cartoon explored. With Stranger Things Season 4 finally out, a particular reference that opens the show in its very first season gets rejuvenated in our heads. Season 1, Episode 1, opened with Dustin, Will, Lucas, and Mike playing Dungeons and Dragons, a fantasy tabletop role-playing game. Players get to create their own characters within a fantasy setting. They go on to adventures, fight adversaries, and gain a lot of knowledge on the way. With such a diverse setting in place, it is only natural for the game to branch out into other territories of media. This gave birth to the 1983 cartoon of the same name. In this cartoon, we see 6 kids hopping onto a Dungeons & Dragons ride at an amusement park. It is possible that they have played the game in the past, which is why they were excited to go on that ride. However, they find themselves being teleported into a different realm where they must go on adventures and fight evil with their new powers, but all the while hoping to get back home. Several new places such as desolate graveyards, dungeons that can replenish magical powers, and a beautiful valley inhabited by unicorns add to the world building of the story. This also brings in a range of evil creatures that oppose the main cast, but nevertheless boast incredible character designs. In this video, we will go over what the series is all about, its heroes, villains, voice actors, possible ending, and the upcoming live-action movie. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What's the Dungeons & Dragons 1983 animated television series all about? The Dungeons & Dragons animated series had a run from 1983 to 1985 for 27 episodes across 3 seasons. It was produced by TSR and Marvel Productions, while its animation was done by the popular Japanese animation studio Toei Animation, the studio that animates One Piece. It is based on the popular game of Dungeons & Dragons, which was invented by Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, with the latter being involved in the co-production of the animated series, with a role-playing or an RPG as a source of inspiration. The series follows a bunch of characters who are sucked into a fantasy realm and assigned different roles with powers, all having the same goal. It follows 6 young characters who try out the Dungeons & Dragons roller coaster at an amusement park. They soon get sucked into a different world full of dragons and magic and find themselves with different weapons, skill sets, and powers. Naturally, they have a common goal now: to get back home. But it won't be that easy. The cast is very distinct, with every character having a unique personality that sets them apart from the rest. Hank leads the group as the Ranger. He also wields a magical, powerful bow and arrow with activated glowing arrows. He is the eldest of the lot and the most level-headed of them all. Next, you have Bobby, the youngest. He is the barbarian who sports a Viking helmet and carries a magical club as his weapon. The club can create huge shock waves that can break doors, walls, and the ground. He is also quite emotionally charged, unlike the more calm and collected Ranger. Then there's Presto, whose original name is Albert. He is the magician of the group and is a stereotypical 80's nerd. He gets super nervous, wears glasses, and has low self-esteem. He generally whips out his magic from his magic hat and spell. Unfortunately, his magic never yields the results he intended to get because the user of the magic has to have a clear mind with reference of what they want. So, Presto's indecisiveness and lack of confidence contribute to his magic not being what it needs to be. For example, while trying to whip out a burger, he whipped out a whole cow.
Abra, come here! Magic burgers up here!
But nevertheless, he manages to save the group when in trouble. Bobby's elder sister, Sheila, is also a part of the group. She is a thief who can turn invisible by flipping the hood of her magical cloak over her head. Having come into contact with the Dungeon Master's magic, she can understand fairy language quite well. This helps the group out when the Dungeon Master is caught and a Peter Pan-like fairy arrives to inform the kids about it. There is also Diana the acrobat. She uses a javelin to pole vault into different places and to take out her opponents. Turns out, she's an Olympic-level gymnast in the real world as well. And finally, there's the snobbish brat Eric, who is the cavalier, ironically. He is characterized by his brattiness and cowardice, and offers comic relief. Diana tends to roast him quite a bit, but to be fair, he is realistic. And there does lie heroism in his heart, as he is constantly seen using his strong and resilient shield to protect his friends and save them when necessary.
Quick, get under my shield!
Bobby finds a companion in Uni, a very young and cute unicorn who happens to tag along with Bobby and his group in their quest. It comes from the Valley of the Unicorns, and like the other unicorns, it can teleport once a day. Its power obviously lies in the horn, which is something Venger wants as well. Without the horn, Uni grows sick and feeble. On the other hand, you've got the antagonist, Different episodes have different villains that range from bloodthirsty spiders to snails that can kidnap the kids. However, the big bad guy of the show is Venger. His magic is super powerful, and of course, he has an underling, the Shadow Demon. His goal is simple, to get the powers and weapons of the children to get stronger in the realm he lives in. There is also Tiamat, the dragon, inspired by Babylonian mythology.
It's Tiamat!
She is a 5-headed dragon who is one of the first adversaries the children face. She is the goddess of all the dragons in the show, with each of her heads being a different color to signify the 5 races of the realm's chromatic dragons: blue, red, white, black, and green. Each head spews out a different element, making her one of the most fearsome beings in the realm. However, she is not exactly a villain, as she stands against both the children and Venger. She does not even have any evil motivations, and guards the dragon's graveyard, a place with the skeletons of dragons and some magical artifacts possessed by the heroes of the past. The presence of these heroes prove how the kids are not the only humans to come to this realm. With the heroes now and then having their own power, they must be getting in from somewhere. And navigating through an unknown realm to get back home surely sounds like something children should be getting capable of. This is where the Dungeon Master comes in, a very short but powerful wizard who talks in riddles. Dungeon Master guides the children who he has taken as his disciples on their journey. He is the one who gives them and the heroes of their past weapons. However, he is a mysterious guy. He appears to give the kids a new quest and suddenly disappears into thin air.
Let it begin with you, Ranger.
I said no riddles.
He just wants to teach them a valuable lesson while offering an opportunity to exit the realm, which could be a side effect of successfully completing a quest. The children often come close to going back home, but for one reason or the other, they have to stay back.
Face!
Please, don't remind me. I'll probably have to look this way forever.
For example, in the second episode called The Eye of the Beholder, they almost go back home, but with one of their allies in trouble, the children decide to stay back to save their friend from the Beholder. This is a common pattern that continues throughout the story. In fact, they go back to their world in the 13th episode called The Box, but they are followed by Venger and choose to go back to the realm of Dungeons and Dragons to take Venger away from their home. They actually opened a portal to Earth 8 times in 27 episodes. As an adventure show, this animated series is extremely creative. The pace is quite fast and does a great job at setting up the premise within the first 60 seconds of each episode, after which the story for the day begins to unravel. Each episode is also action-packed and high in adrenaline, keeping the eyes and the viewers glued to their screen. It explores several different places within the realms, several characters, and many more stories. The show also does a great job at highlighting the characters and giving them their character arcs. Cavalier starts off as a snobbish brat who also cares about himself and his father's money. However, he is gradually turned into a more likable character as his bonds with the others are strengthened, and he is often seen sacrificing his own selfish desires to help out his friends. There is a particular episode that highlights the darker elements of the story better. In the Dragon's Graveyard, which is the 20th episode, the children miss a chance to get back home once again, and it takes a huge emotional toll on Ranger and Bobby, who are otherwise more high-spirited and optimistic. Ranger begins to agree with the Cavalier's selfish demands and talks back to the Dungeon Master. Meanwhile, Uni gets terribly injured, turns Bobby against Venger, making the kid absolutely succumb to his hatred towards the wizard. In the end, they are both willing to kill Venger, which is a territory children's cartoons try not to step into. However, all is well in the end, as the same old cliches of, if we finish you, we become just like you, pop up. It's actually strange how Dungeons and Dragons is not as popular as it should be. Sure, the 80s were brimming with some of the best cartoons ever, but Dungeons and Dragons was good enough to get a piece of that cake. However, since it's not a source material, which is the game, several avid fans of the game had a distaste for the cartoon. For them, the animated series was a watered-down version of the game. So, the greatness of the show that could be enjoyed by people who have not played Dungeons & Dragons cannot be enjoyed by those who have consumed the game to its fullest. This is somewhat similar to the Percy Jackson experience. If you were to watch The Lightning Thief without having read the book, you would be quite entertained. The cast is cool, the villains are cool, with Medusa, Hydra, and Hermes' son, Luke, opposing Percy, Annabeth, and Grover. However, if you read the book, you'll know how terribly off the movie is from the book, which is exactly why the movie is widely disliked by fans of the franchise. The first episode, The Night of No Tomorrow, does a great job with its exposition of the plot. It begins with Presto screaming atop a hilly area to hear the echo. When Uni tries it, instead of hearing an echo of his own voice, the kid hears Tiamat, the 5-headed dragon. arrives and the group is not strong enough to fight her. However, Sheila lures the dragon into a cave by standing in front of it and then turns invisible to confuse the creature. Then, Bobby hits a big piece of rock to block the entrance to the cave. The dungeon master appears to congratulate them. Eric the Cavalier is no fan of his riddle talking and just wants a straight answer as to how to get back home. But the dungeon master tells him that there is a purpose to the group finding themselves in the realm and goes on to give them their first quest. They are sent to a place called Helix, which will have a celebration tonight. Long ago, Helix was attacked by a flying dragon. However, good magic had saved the village, and tonight they will be indulging in the annual celebration of that event. The kids are likely to find a way back home in this quest, but this is the first episode after all. The dungeon master does warn them about Venger, who might get in their way. He also asks the children to head north. On the way, they find the castle of Merlin. You know, Merlin, the guy who is the strongest wizard ever in history about magic.
Appeared, cast a spell, and his good magic drove out evil.
They meet with Merlin, who turns out to be the one who drove the flying dragons away from Helix. They try to get Merlin to help them with going towards Helix when Tiamat appears out of nowhere to attack them. With some teamwork, the five-headed dragon is locked in a dungeon. Interestingly, Merlin seems to be quite impressed with Presto's magic and asks him to help him as an apprentice. Presto agrees to stay back, and his friends wonder if it is because they always make fun of him. Merlin asks for Presto's help with the cauldron for reasons unknown. In Merlin's absence, Presto looks for a spell to get home. He finds it in the spell book and tries it out. However, it releases several flying dragons from the cauldron who leave the castle immediately. Turns out, Merlin was Venger all along and used Presto's good magic to undo Merlin's spell. At Helix, Ranger learns that Merlin died 1,000 years ago. He realizes that they were tricked. The village is soon attacked and the children head back to Merlin's castle to save Presto. Venger attacks and they decide to unleash Tiamat to take Venger down. Meanwhile, Ranger tries to get Presto to undo the spell.
Name of Merlin, in the time of sorrow, banish winged demon, let there be tomorrow.
Thankfully, the spell works and Helix is saved again. This also shows us that despite Presto's magic failing time and again, he succeeds when he's needed the most, during times of desperation. In the third episode, the Hall of Bones, the children's weapons lose their magical charge and they must immediately go to the Hall of Bones to recharge them.
There it is, my friends. The Hall of Bones.
What they do not know is that Venger wants to steal their weapons and intercepts them midway. Using their weapons, he tries to fight Tiamat, oblivious to the fact that the weapons have lost their charge. He tosses the weapons aside and the children finally head to the Hall of Bones. But after their weapons are charged, Venger tries to take them once again, and this time, the spirits of the heroes of the past defend the kids against Venger. In the 22nd episode, The Dungeon at the Heart of Dawn, a new villain far more powerful than Venger appears. The scenario in this episode is so grave that the dungeon master not only accompanies his disciples throughout the quest, but he is also severely fatigued from fighting back. Under Ranger's command, Eric opens a black box which sends a signal to call upon the realm's worst devil. In a way, it is somewhat similar to Pandora's box. The demon causes destruction wherever it goes, and it is alluded that this is Venger's boss. The dungeon master can barely fight back against it and must head to the dungeon at the Heart of Dawn to replenish his powers and the powers of the weapon. Of course, it won't be that easy as Venger and his various creatures arrive to stand in their way. Presto finds himself on the verge of death, but ultimately, the dungeon master gets his powers back and saves everyone. It is also suggested that this demon they were fighting would take over the realm. It had left for the other realms to wreak havoc there, but the dungeon master believed that it would return. There was also a moment in a previous episode where the dungeon master called Venger his son.
Rise, my son.
While Venger referred to him as his old man. This straight up gave away the fact that they were related, but the show was canceled before either of the two plot points could be covered. In fact, the show was canceled before the main cast could go back home. The cast of Dungeons & Dragons boasts renowned names in their roster of voice actors. Willie Ames, voices of Hank the Ranger. He is well known for playing Tommy Bradford on the 70s show called 80's Enough. Adam Rich, who plays Presto the Magician, has also appeared in 80's Enough as Nicholas Bradford. Ralph Mouth from Happy Days, aka Don Most, voiced Eric the Cavalier. Voice actor Katie Lee was behind the voice of Sheila, the thief. She is renowned for voicing Zuzu in Poppycat. Teddy Field III voiced Bobby, the Barbarian, while Tanya Gale Smith voiced Diana, the Acrobat. American actor, songwriter, and director Sidney Miller gave his voice to the Dungeon Master. The voice of Optimus Prime from the 80s Transformers was the man behind Venger. Finally, Frank Welker voiced Uni and Tiamat and stole the show with his animalistic screeches. What went wrong with the cartoon? After the 6th episode of the 3rd season, that is the Winds of Darkness episode, Dungeons & Dragons was canceled. The show suffered from low ratings and several reasons contributed to it. We've already gone over how the avid players of the RPG game did not like the diluted versions of the events in the cartoon. Rumor has it that the show was deemed to be too violent to be a kid's show. This show did have its more severe moments, especially with Hank and Bobby wanting to kill Venger, or the evil demons that paralyzed the characters with fear. The National Coalition on Television Violence thought that the show needed to display a warning before the episodes were aired and that it has been linked to violent deaths in real life. After a student committed suicide, his mother blamed Dungeons & Dragons for it. On top of that, a lot of people believe that the show perpetrated witchcraft and deemed it to be satanic. The accusations have been proven false though, but an issue with the production gave the show its biggest blow. It was growing way too fast as a company with their several Dungeons & Dragons board games and books. They were also handling media in several formats, causing the company to be spread too thin. As a result, they could not afford to incur losses, and with so many negative factors causing the cartoon series trouble, the show was taken off the air.
Boy, and I will be easier on you and your friends.
No way, Jose!
A huge shame, really, because the show was in fact incredible, unless you are a die-hard Dungeons & Dragons player. This also means that viewers did not get any closure regarding the fate of the characters. The ending was conclusive, but the children were still trapped in the realm of magic, fantasy, Dungeons & Dragons. Naturally, fans came up with several other fan theories about what could happen. An urban legend fan theory that grew way too popular would be one where people believed children died in the Dungeons & Dragons ride and ended up in hell. This was obviously too dark for a children's cartoon, but hey, lots of animated media come from originally dark stories. However, this was untrue, as attested to by the writer himself. Later, an ending called Requiem was created by the series writer Michael Reeves, but it was never produced. Voice actor Katie Lee reprised her role as Sheila for the audio play version of the episode. The story of the Requiem was later animated by VCI Eclipse, which is basically a fan-made animation with mostly comic strips and a voiceover. It used the audio from the real play version. At some points, fans gave their voices to certain characters when necessary. The story opens up with a dialogue between the Dungeon Master and Venger. Venger believes that the kids have made it this far in their journey because Dungeon Master standing behind them gives them their courage. Without the Dungeon Master's support, they will lose their bravery. He then strikes a deal with the Master, a deal where the Dungeon Master will revoke his support, while Venger will command them to the edge of the realm to destroy a special key. If they succeed, they will get back home. If they fail, Venger will take away their powers and their lives. In the meantime, the kids fight a 7-headed Hydra and find themselves in a very helpless situation. No matter what they try, the Hydra is way too strong for them. Suddenly, Dungeon Master appears. The kids think that they are finally safe, as Dungeon Master can help them. But, boy, are they wrong. Staying true to the deal, the Dungeon Master chooses not to help anyone and vanishes, turning the kids, especially Eric, against him. After a lot of struggle, the children manage to evade their perilous situation and continue with their journey. When they find a fork in the road, east looks like a road more traveled, while the west slopes downward. Hank decides to head west, as it is more likely that there will be water, while Eric wants to head eastward, as it is more likely to have a town-like settlement. They argue, and ultimately Hank gives up. The group heads eastward and sets up camp. That night, Venger appears in front of them. He tells them how the Dungeon Master is not on their side, which is why they keep finding themselves on several quests, but never back home. But then shows them a portal to the amusement park on Earth and tells them about a key. If they throw the key in the abyss, Venger will let them go home. Eric is game with this plan because there is nothing he wants more than to go home. But there's no way Hank can trust Venger. The group breaks into an argument and is ultimately split in two. Bobby, Uni, and Diana side with Hank, while Presto and Sheila being beside Eric. That night, Eric's group sets off to find a key in a galleon, while a bronze dragon appears in front of Hank and co. After it shows their allegiance to them, Hank sets off to stop Eric with his team. On the way, he attacks Eric as he believes that he is playing right into Venger's hands. He shoots a glowing arrow at him, but Eric shields it. The arrow falls into the volcanoes below, causing a severe eruption that almost kills him. Later, they try to reach the cenotaph, where one side looks into an abyss while the other side had to vault with a keyhole. In the middle of the room, an ornate sarcophagus sits. It looks like the sarcophagus of a noble wizard and contained the key. Eric gets the key and holds on to it, but just then, a giant amoeba-like monster attacks. Everyone is overwhelmed by the monster, who neutralizes almost every member, including Venger, who has appeared. Hank and Eric find themselves at the edge of the realm. arguing and fighting over the key. Hank tries to prevent Eric from throwing the key into the abyss, but then falls into it himself. Without Hank to stop Eric, he can now throw the key into the abyss. However, Hank changes his mind that very moment and uses the key to open the vault. As the vault and the doors open, a massive light causes the gelatinous monster to disappear. Meanwhile, Hank is alive, as he is apparently holding on to a rock and was subsequently helped up by Diana. The light ends up transforming Venger, who is revealed to be the noble and majestic figure that the kids saw in the sarcophagus. The Dungeon Master appears and is ecstatic to see his son again. The kids are shocked to know that Venger is the Dungeon Master's son. Turns out that Venger had chosen to follow a different master who turned out to be evil, and the primary mission was not to defeat Venger, but to redeem it. With Venger freed, the kids are also granted their freedom, and they finally get to go back home.
Do something, Hank! You're the leader!
Interesting facts about Dungeons & Dragons. With so much happening in each episode and throughout the course of the series, several burning questions arise in the minds of the viewers. And the obvious one is with reference to time and how the families of the kids are reacting since they're missing. The opening titles of the second season reworked the titles to show how much time had passed since the kids had entered the dungeon realm. They presently exist as archive footage. In the ending credits, the amusement park is shown in the nighttime, which also explains how all the other visitors have gone back home while the kids are still trapped. However, how time passed in the two realms was addressed in the city at the edge of midnight. Turns out, time moves faster in the dungeons realm, and with respect to that, a few hours had passed in the real world versus the weeks and months in the fantastical realm. This episode was also an incredibly creepy one, with a demon called the Nightwalker kidnapping children at night and turning them into slaves. The episode, In Search of the Dungeon Master, also glossed over the bad guys keeping slaves, but they were ultimately freed by the kids. The show is no stranger to darker topics after all, especially with episodes like The Dragon's Graveyard. In The Time Lost, we got a glimpse of how evil Venger truly is after he opened numerous portals back in the time of World War II on Earth to help the Nazis. Not a very friendly topic for a kids show. However, the story is less about the fights and the magic and more about self-discovery. In the very first episode, the Dungeon Master spoke about the kids being in his realm for a purpose. That's why there's so much emphasis on Presto learning how to control his magic with increased self-esteem, and Eric becoming more of a team worker instead of keeping his bratty behavior. Only when they finally rediscover themselves will they be able to return home. That's probably why Eric's final turnaround as a character causing Venger's redemption in the Requiem storyline brought their quest to an end. The future of Dungeons & Dragons. Courtney Solomon's live-action adaptation of Dungeons & Dragons in the year 2000 created headlines for all the wrong reasons, but maybe things will be different this time around, as a new live-action adaptation of this popular RPG is about to hit the screens in 2023. Writers Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly are working on the story and will be released on March 3rd, 2023. It was originally supposed to be released on May 27, 2022, but due to Paramount's lineup, the release date was pushed back. It was shot in Iceland and filming was wrapped up by August 2021. It is also set to have a star-studded cast, with Chris Pine, previously seen in movies like Jack Ryan and Wonder Woman, and Michelle Rodriguez, who has starred in Fast and the Furious 9 and the science fiction blockbuster Avatar, Enrique John Page, who played the Duke in Bridgerton Series 1, British rom-com superstar Hugh Grant, Jurassic World's Justice Smith, and Sophia Lillis from the It franchise will also be part of the cast. Even though the lore behind the game is super dark, the writers have added comedic elements to the action fantasy script. Since action fantasy movies tend to attract a younger crowd, the writers need to strike the right balance and diffuse excessive seriousness with the occasional comedy. We have already seen how the lovers of the game did not react well to the delusion of the original story. To avoid that problem, the writers have claimed to pay respect to the source material first. The original Dungeons & Dragons cartoon is definitely a must-watch for everyone. Despite being set in a fantasy world, it is very emotionally realistic. Bobby's attachment to Uni in particular is very heartwarming to experience. Presto's struggle with his esteem, and Hank being shown as the Gary Sue leader, snapping and wishing to kill Venger out of rage, makes them more realistic. The general spectrum of emotions that were expressed in every character was a breath of fresh air. Johnny Douglas and Robert J. Walsh's score added more flavor to this already successful recipe, and the animal screech sounds were terrifying, proving that it was perfectly done and used. And if you like the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.